Please take it away, guys.
Cool. Thanks for the intro, Haitham. Hey everyone, I'm Ankur. I'm the CEO of this company, Runx, and JD is also here, who also works with us, and he's the lead engineer.
Hello.
So yeah, I have a quick few slides, and then I'll show you guys a demo. Let me just share that. Cool. So yeah, today I just want to talk a bit about this open source project that we have called Opta. It's Opta is basically an infrastructure as code solution similar to Terraform, but it works at a much higher level abstraction. So you can, with a very clean interface, you can specify your containers, your databases, any other resources you need, and then it can provision that on your cloud account. It's pretty cloud agnostic, and we support AWS and GCP currently, and we are working on Azure support. For Flyte, we have been working with the Flyte team over the last few weeks and trying to build that Flyte-Opta integration. So that's what I would be showing you today. And as Haitham said, the goal here is to make it super seamless for people to deploy Flyte in their AWS accounts. Also, I believe Opta is now the recommended way to deploy Flyte. We have merged the relevant PRs in the Flyte code base and the Flyte docs. So we are very excited about this development. Cool. Before I move forward, I just wanna show you guys the Flyte architecture that we would like to create today. So this diagram I've taken from the Flyte docs. And as you can see, it's basically running a Kubernetes cluster with a bunch of Flyte pods there. And the pods connect to various other AWS resources. Like we are using Aurora for Postgres, we are using SQS. I believe we also use SNS. And then we have S3 to store some stuff there. And then there is an ingress at the front of all of this where all the incoming requests come through. So this is our end goal that we would like to create today. And let me just switch to my terminal and I can show you folks how you would achieve this with Opta. Before I do that, any questions about the setup, the overview? You guys get it where Opta fits? Cool, awesome. Okay. So the way Opta works, you write configuration files similar to Terraform configuration files, and then you run our CLI tool called Opta. And so for the case of Flyte, what we have done is we first create an environment. So I'll just show you that. And what the environment does is it tells us which cloud, which region you are running in, and it configures a few common settings, right? So in this case, we have defined a domain name for the environment. We have set up a Kubernetes cluster where we have a few configuration options like max node, min nodes. And all this, what this is going to do is it's going to set up a VPC, subnets, all that stuff for you. It will set up an ingress, Kubernetes, service mesh. And in our documentation, you can find more details about how each of these pieces are connected together. But we see an environment as sort of the base that every application needs. And then you can start deploying your applications on this. So I created this environment file. I ran Opta apply, and that would connect to AWS, set everything up. And by the way, Opta is taking AWS credentials from my terminal. So this is the particular account I have configured here. So that's what Opta is using. Yeah, so you do this, and yeah, so I started with a blank AWS account, created this environment, ran Opta apply, that has created a Kubernetes cluster and everything else for me. Now I need to create another opta.yml, which is going to be specific to Flyte and which will show you how Flyte should be configured in this environment. So I'll just open that here. So I'll just walk you through this because there's a few different fields here. First of all, I'm referring to the environment that was created in the first step. You can see that this could be used to, if you want multiple deployments of Flyte, you can have them in the same AWS account, you can have them in different AWS accounts. Eventually, you'll be able to do them in different cloud providers. Currently, I believe Flight is only optimized for AWS, but I'm guessing that's down the roadmap for them. So you pick your environment here, then you start configuring all the resources that your Flight installation needs. So we have a Postgres database here, which will be mapped to AWS RDS. So that's another good thing about Opta, that we don't ask you to run databases and everything inside Kubernetes, which are not the most efficient way to run these resources. We fall back to the cloud resources. So Postgres here would be mapped to AWS RDS. There's an S3 bucket here. We are creating SQS and SNS buckets and queues. And you can also notice that in this configuration file, using interpolation, you can connect all these resources together, right? If you're trying to do this manually with Terraform, that's the sort of complicated part where you have to make sure the right credentials, the right sort of ARNs and names follow through all these different resources. So here you just interpolate them and everything works as you would expect. We are creating a few IAM roles that Flight needs to operate. And yeah, and then lastly, we are instantiating the Flight Helm chart here. And so what's happening here is, again, the same interpolation that we were using before. You can use that to pass the credentials for all these databases and S3 buckets that we were creating into the Helm chart. Um, Another thing to note here is that you can use the domain that we created for the environment. So if you guys remember, we had that set up as demo.runx.dev. So we are telling Flight that we want to run Flight at flight.demo.runx.dev. A bunch more interpolation to connect all those things together. And these are just common configurations from the Flight Helm chart. And yeah, so that's basically it. We created all the AWS resources that Flight needs. We instantiated the Flight Helm chart. We used our interpolation to connect all of these things together, and we have pointed all of this at the Kubernetes cluster and the environment that was created in the previous step. So once all this is done, you just run Opta apply here. I've run that before, so it's going to be faster this time, but I believe it takes a few minutes. The longest time it takes is for creating your Postgres databases, because RDS takes like 5-10 minutes to set up. But otherwise, this stuff is like 5-ish minutes. Creating the environment, which requires creating the Kubernetes clusters, is again 10-15 minutes, because that's AWS just takes that much time. And you can see here that we are using Terraform under the hood. So whatever YAML file you're configuring and how you are connecting all these resources together, we convert everything to Terraform, and then we use Terraform to do the actual application. So this allows us to sort of depend on Terraform for making sure everything is robust, for making sure we can do proper incremental updates when things change. And it's showing me here that there's no change to do because I've already done this before. And yeah, then once this is done, it tells me a bunch of stuff here that we have created. And just to remind you folks again, we set up we used the domain name flight.parent domain, and our parent domain was demo.runx.dev. So I'll just let me just switch to my browser. Where is my tab? Yeah. So yeah, here I can just go to flight.demo.runx.dev/console, which is where the admin UI is present. And you can see we have Flight running here, right? And this has gRPC support, so you can use the Flight CLI and connect to it and create and run your workflows. It's using all those resources and all that architecture that we created in the YAML file. So yeah, that's all. That's basically a quick overview of how you can use Opta to deploy Flight. And And just a tiny plug for our software. This is all open source. So if any of you folks feel like you might have other applications for this, feel free to check us out on GitHub. Let me just share that link. Yeah, feel free to check us out on GitHub, hop into our Slack, or just message me or JD, and we would love to work with you folks as well. That's all. So any questions, any more clarifications, any other part I can dig into, happy to do that now.
Hey, Ankur, this is Santosh. Can you basically compare and contrast a little bit of the complications that one has to handle when using Terraform, and then how your kind of framework solves it? I'm very new to this, so I don't understand Terraform either very well. So assume no prior knowledge.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
No, that's a really good question. And so there's a lot of ways to approach this. The one way I describe Terraform versus Opta is that Terraform is like the C language of infrastructure, right? When you try to do all this in Terraform, you have to configure. Sorry?
No. I was just saying yes. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So when you configure all this with Terraform, you'll have to configure every single thing manually, right? You'll have to say, this is my network, these are my subnets, these are my IP addresses, these are the particular security groups I want to be opened. And what we see Opta as is like the Python language of infrastructure, where we have designed a bunch of these things based on our multiple years of experience working in infrastructure. We have used all the best practices there. We have figured out how to connect them in the right ways, and you get those components out of the box. So that's how I think these differ. You can obviously do all this in Terraform, and that's what we are doing under the hood as well. But it's just going to be a lot of time to write the particular templates and configuring them the right way. And secondly, you just need to have a bit more expertise if you're using Terraform, right? You need to know about the sort of details of how all these AWS resources work. And you'll have to make sure that you are connecting them in the right way to make sure it's secure, it's scalable, you're doing multi-AZ, all of that stuff. And so our goal with Opta is that we take away that complexity from users. So people who are not like DevOps or infra experts can sort of work with these systems.
Okay. So in short, if I say that, I mean, you reduce the complexity, introduce the best practices, and also make it much more efficient in terms of the number of lines of configurations one will have to set. Those would be the major advantages.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks.
Just one clarification, minor. We have companies here, I think some are on the call, that are running Flyte in GCP. So we know like it works well there. I think part of one of the next steps in this partnership is getting the right configuration or the right environment YAML for Opta to also be able to do the same thing on GCP. And hopefully it will look very similar to what you see in AWS, except that it will now provision the right GCP resources. And once you look at this like bigger picture, it will look a lot neater and a lot cleaner, a lot more maintainable from our side. To just pick and choose the right modules to use in the different providers, and then make it all work. And I think, so Ankur also mentioned this is all merged in the Flyte repo, and the docs are updated, so you can follow along. The manifests he showed are also all checked in, so you can like use this today. We have been using it for the past few weeks. We did a lot of deployments on our own, using these from scratch and updates and all of that. So we know it's quite robust, and the team is amazingly responsive. If you find any issues or any problems with the deployments, so go ahead and check it out. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chetan. And we have also loved collaborating with you folks, and we look forward to continue doing this. Thanks, everyone.